Good evening. My name is Sargis Sangari. I am the Republican nominee for the 9th Congressional District in Illinois, and this is New Paradigms. Today is our third showing of New Paradigms, and I am glad to have you here. Last week, we were joined by Charlene Foss, the Maine Township Republican committeeman, and the 9th Congressional District State Central Committeeman, and Susan Sweeney, who's was a deputy for the Maine Township Republican committeeman. So we're delighted again for our third showing today on 15 June to be now joined by Kathy Myalls. Kathy Myalls is a corporate attorney in Chicago, serving as the assistant general counsel at the Interpublic Group of companies. She has been an adjunct professor at DePaul University, my alma mater, teaching constitutional law. And she currently serves as the New Trier Township Republican committeeman, which is a position to which she was elected in 2018. Kathy was formerly a member of the New Trier caucus, which selects candidates for the New Trier School Board. She currently serves on the school board for the School of Saints, Faith, Hope, and Charity in Winnetka, and is one of the board of directors of the Geneva Lake Water Safety Patrol. She previously served on the national board and was the president of the Chicago board for I should say, for Prevent Child Abuse America. And Kathy currently lives in Wilmette, Illinois, with her husband and her two sons. So, Kathy, welcome to the New Paradigm podcast. It's my pleasure to have you on the program. Another wonderful GOP female and one of the leads in my district. Welcome.
Thank you, Sargis. Thanks for having me today.
Kathy, I want to start with kind of having you tell us a bit about the New Trier Township. What is the demographics? What are we looking at when we're talking about New Trier? How's it laid out in the 9th Congressional District? And a portion of it I know that falls in the 10th.
New Trier Township is, as it sounds, the area that feeds into New Trier High School. It's a tiny bit of Glenview, but it's primarily Wilmette, Winnetka, Kenilworth, and parts of Glencoe, most of Glencoe. And as you suggested, most of New Trier Township now belongs to the 10th district, the 10th Congressional District. Part of New Trier Township is also elects our 9th district congressman, who which obviously is the position that you're running for. It's interesting because the line has moved between the 9th and the 10th districts over the last few years, and certainly certainly after the last census. It is a line that has moved in part to, it was moved in part to change the demographics a bit for what was then Congressman Bob Dole, and is now the seat held by Brad Schneider. So it's in Illinois, the politicians pick their voters and not the other way around. It's so it's the 9th and 10th district now.
Well, welcome to gerrymandering, and as I've said this before, and it's very important for the voters to understand. The politicians and the incumbents choose who is going to vote for them. It's not the voters who choose who they want to vote for. It's unfortunate. We have a cemetery in the 9th Congressional District that is divided into two. It's a Jewish cemetery, which a friend of mine has both his parents buried there, and it sits between the 9th and the 10th. And my question has been, why does a cemetery need to be divided into two? It is unfortunate reality of Illinois politics. It's something that we have to work through even during this election process. Kathy, I wanted to kind of pick your mind, being a committee man, to let me know what is major concerns for the New Trier Township residents. What are some of the things that they're looking at as issues and topics currently?
Well, I think, in the ninth district, I can only speak specifically to New Trier. Obviously, we have, people move here for the schools. They're very concerned about education for their children. They are concerned about property taxes, of course, because that is one of the major drivers of economic woes in Illinois. And they want to be sure that they're safe and secure in their homes and that their children can go to parks and play outside and meet their friends. And um, the mothers in New Trier, we don't want to worry about whether our children are going to get shot on their way to school or sitting on their patios.
Well, look, that concern goes across the entire United States. Unfortunately, as you're seeing with what is happening with the riots that are taking place, and you have individuals in this case, Antifa and others, that are claiming chunks of the United States for themselves. As we discussed last week with Shar and Susan, and pointed out here, how even CHICOM, Chinese Communist Party, and all these other outside agitators are actually funneling and supporting some of these movements. In Seattle, you have the Antifa folks who have actually written a letter to the United Nations asking for recognition. I know there's some movements here in Chicago trying to duplicate and mimic what they are doing. Next week, hopefully, we'll have a little bit more updates on the next program as to what they might be trying here in Chicago. But can you imagine one day just in the United States today, waking up and next day the police isn't there? They're not allowed to respond in your neighborhood. You have individuals who are saying that we're going to claim this piece of property territory as a separate nation than the United States. So you, as an American, everything that you have held dear to yourself and cherished throughout your entire time of raising a family does not apply here. And if there's any dissenting comments that you make against these individuals, that they could use violence against you, and they have used it within that little area that they've kept hold to themselves. And the elected mayor of that particular city, to include the governor, have not taken any steps to correct any measures of allowing those Americans to be secure and have their say. I've seen on the news media where you have news outlets from both end of the aisle walking in and interviewing store owners. And the store owner, of course, store owner is saying that there's nothing wrong here. It's kind of a public gathering, but at the same time, he's saying that you have an Antifa guy who's standing there in the store, and the Antifa guy has a weapon on him. Of course, that individual is going to say that. So our news media is not capable of separating the hostage from the hostage taker to realize what's going on. Is unfortunate. So hopefully we're not going to get there to that day. And with the riots taking place, as we saw, a lot of the areas that were targeted had more to do with targeting the black neighborhoods that were starting to finally be able to recover, given the current POTUS's actions which he has taken to support the black community overall economically.
No, I agree, and I think it's very important to distinguish between peaceful protesters who are objecting to legitimate concerns about black neighborhoods and black members of our communities, and the riots, which are not only different people, they're different tactics, they're different strategies, and obviously completely different results. The first one we have to support completely. It is everybody's constitutional right in America to engage in peaceful protest and to secure your First Amendment rights through peaceful speech and assembly. And I support the people who are protesting. The riots, on the other hand, are something completely lawless. And we saw that not only in black neighborhoods, but in retail neighborhoods. North Michigan Avenue was looted. The Bentley store was destroyed. 900 North Michigan stores on the second, third, fourth floors were decimated. People were pulling clothes out by the carload, and hangers were all over the street, and windows were broken, businesses were disrupted. And I have not been downtown recently. I understand that a lot of the carnage is still there. Businesses are afraid to engage in any repairs because they're concerned it's going to happen again.
Look, I've said it multiple times. I've been interviewed on multiple shows, and I will say it again. I think these lootings were targeted for a specific requirement or reason. That's why these neighborhoods were chosen. We know that under the current president, there were a lot of opportunities to support the black community economically, and the best way you can empower the black community is to be able to allow them to have economic freedom. Those zones of opportunity that we talk about that the president had created with money directly going to those communities in our neighborhoods here, where some of them were depicted as a renaissance of the black community in Chicago, were targeted and burned and destroyed. That was a direct political decision by those agitators to ensure that those communities were hit. I think it has more to do with establishing the political discussions, given the fact that we're 5 months almost away from the 2020 election. And I truly believe that these attacks on these neighborhoods were chosen for a reason. If you think about it, you had Congress all these years had an opportunity to fix a lot of these issues. They didn't do anything about it. The president had a few things in his kit bag that he has ability as an executive to do. And even if you take a look at the fact that he finally went ahead and actually took money and gave it to the black colleges, specifically trying to help them out. So he's done what he can from his ability as an executive to channel those dollars and money to be able to support those programs. There's a lot of other programs that you could talk about that really were to help empower the black community so that we could give them the voice it needs to be able to finally say, you know what, we're going to go in a different direction, not the direction that the politicians have been telling us to go all this time.
Correct. And I know, Sargis, you and I have spoken about it. I know that you support not only the opportunity zones that the president helped create with targeted tax incentives, but the funding for the HCBUs, the historically black colleges and universities. And, the unemployment rate for blacks, and in particular black women, was lower under this president than it's ever been. So, the actions that the president took to help these communities, I agree with you. Those were completely undermined, perhaps intentionally. But I know that you would support any efforts to rebuild those communities because that's been an important part of your campaign.
No, I would, and I would make sure that there's law enforcement in place to be able to protect those communities. It's a shame that our elected officials chose not to allow law enforcement to protect those communities. And the police can only execute the orders that their executives give them. In this case, the mayors of the cities are the executives that give those orders to the police to execute. So the police is executing what the politicians telling them to do. And it's, again, like I said, is unfortunate. I don't know if those businesses can rebuild again, but I'm sure that depending on what happens with the elections, we might go back and be able to build those communities. Look, I look at it this way. The current POTUS, President Trump, either is going to be in office in 5 months or he won't be in office in 5 months. But the fact is that you've had incumbents, to include the incumbent I'm running against, who's been sitting in her seat for 20 years. You see these politicians go through these shows with taking a knee in Congress, putting what they believe is the traditional African dress, which is an insult to the African American community, who has even spoken against it in those 8 minutes as a photo op to say we're doing something about it. Well, where were you 20 years ago? Where were you 15 years ago? Where were you 5 years ago? Why didn't you take those steps? Why does it have to take the current president to be able to take the steps to do what he can from his executive level to unscrew some of these friction points that you have caused? Have you sat there for 8 minutes that you were taking a knee, and at least for those just 8 minutes thought about how can you fix these problems? You control the Senate, you control the House. Previously, you had your president in power for 8 years. And why didn't you take those steps? Why didn't the president or previous POTUS take those steps when it comes to signing these executive orders? And this is what boggles my mind. You have a guy who's been in for less than 30 plus months, and he's a target of all the attacks. You have individuals who've been in, as I said last time, we were looking at the combined number of the incumbents on the Democratic Party, and the Republicans are the same as far as how many years they've sat in their office of top leadership. You're looking at almost 219 years of sitting in the legislation or in the legislature, and you're not doing anything about it. Remember, the riots that are taking place today, the looting that is taking place today, the attacks that you see are taking place, even what you see in Seattle taking place with the Antifa being involved. These individuals are there because of the legislators, because the legislators have not done their job. If the legislators were doing their job, we wouldn't be where we are today. But these incumbents are the reason we are where we are today. And eventually, if you want to change it, you have to get them out.
Well, we have incumbents who are not only failing to do their own job by not going to work the way there are a lot of other Americans have to, but they're double dipping on pensions, which frankly is causing some of the economic woes that are particularly hitting Black communities in our cities and in our various communities. Your opponent, Jan Schakowsky, receives 2 pensions from voters in her district, and it's something that I know you're concerned about from the pension reform perspective. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about what your plans would be.
Look, pensions is a big thing for me. And military guys do this all the time. You serve 20 years in the U.S. military. I've served 20 plus years in the U.S. military. You retire, you go get another job. You serve 20 years there. You can draw 2 pensions, depending on the job you're doing. I don't fault anybody who is drawing pensions, who is out there looking for a job to try to improve their families. I put it on the politicians again, because the politicians use this as a trick to be able to force those individuals that are working, especially in unions, to abide by what they want on the guidelines so they can stay in power. I've seen simple fixes to this from day one. On the policing side, I was the first to say that if you want to fix it, make it nationalized standard for everybody. In this case, if you make a nationalized standard, it's easier to train. We've done this before in the military. We took our military police. We actually went down to California, sat down with their sheriff department to see what are the things that the military police does, that the sheriff does for training of their personnel. And we realized out of the 400 hours that they're similar for 300 hours. Is that last 100 hours that somebody goes and becomes a military policeman and somebody else becomes a sheriff. Same thing. When I took my team downrange to combat operations in Iraq, my team medic, who is certified as a special operational force or soldier, one of the only things that he did differently than regular paramedics ever getting trained was that we did live tissue training at that time that was not allowed for the actual paramedic, because you need to learn how to treat combat wounds. But the rest of the training is the same. Arteries are the same. Eyeballs are the same. And how you treat wounds pretty much is the same. So if you can standardize that training to include with the police officers, instead of having 18,000 different standards and 18,000 different organizations with 18,000 different unions, now you can certify these individuals. You can certify your teachers, first responders, medics, and by certifying them, now it allows the federal government at my level to be able to have a say as to how to support these particular friction issues that are causing these pension problems. One of the pieces that I've always talked about is the fact that currently, if you're getting a 401k and if you are a person in the police department or in the SWAT, let's take the SWAT in Buffalo as an example. You saw the video of that agitator taking pictures of their badges, forcing him to breaking the law when he was told not to be there. A police officer, a member of the SWAT, puts his hands on the individual. He falls down on purpose. He gets reprimanded by the local officials. 57 of those members said, forget about it, we're going to resign. But if I allow those individuals to be able to transfer their 401ks, not just be stuck, in this case, if you're a cop in Illinois, be stuck to that. Now you have to literally allow people to throw urine, feces, bricks at you, put your life in danger. What you could do, you could say, you know what, I'm not going to deal with this politician Mrs. Mayor or Mr. Mayor, if you're not going to help me out, then guess what? I'm going to pack up my stuff, go to Texas. I guarantee you, if you allow those 401ks to be transferable, now you allow those SWAT members to start resigning, be transferred to Texas. Texas will take them. Texas doesn't have a problem. Now you're putting the pressure on the politician to do their job. It's unfortunately that's the only way you could do it. You're supporting the unions to finally be able to have a say when it comes to these discussions as to where we go forward from here when it comes to how to solve our issues. Because a lot of these individuals who are getting the pensions, they don't want to get a pension here and have to end up going somewhere else because the standard of quality is low here. It's not allowing them to be able to use their money the way they want for their future and have to go and execute somewhere else. I've had friends of mine who've left. As you know, I work with the Legion of St. Michael law enforcement community. I'm an international and a national rep for them. And I've had individuals who left their young children who had died early in life, buried in Chicago, to go somewhere else with their family for life. Those individuals don't want to leave their dead behind and go. The only reason they're doing it because a politician here is all forcing them to do it. You want to break this? You want to empower the unions? You want to empower the Black community, get money in the hands of the Black community so they could be independent, wealthy, and be able to choose their future on their own. And you got to be able to give an opportunity for these unions to be able to finally say, you know what, I'm not going to just do whatever you tell me in the voting pool for you. You're going to start listening to me, and you're not going to mistreat my first responders because you have taken the steps to put me in a position where I'm entrapped and I cannot break away from you.
I agree completely that the solution to our pension problem is to take our public sector out of pensions and move to what the private sector did 30 years ago and have workers contribute to their own portable 401ks, which gives them the flexibility you're talking about to be able to take what they've saved and the company contribution, in this case the taxpayer contribution to the 401k, and take it and make a better lives for themselves somewhere else if they need to. In Illinois, part of the pension problem is that not only are we paying pensions and there are raises every year based on whatever the salaries were at the time the workers were working, but a lot of Illinois pensioners don't even live in Illinois. So Illinois is paying them, and they're in California, Florida, Arizona, and it's the pension problem in Illinois and in many other states is one that has been costing around the country money. It's part of the reason that tax reform capped what we could deduct from the SALT, from state and local taxes, from our federal taxes, and having South Dakota or Texas, who run better than Illinois financially, supplementing the Illinois pension crisis was not right. And it's something that I know concerns you, and that is, when you're elected to Congress, will be addressing in some of the bills that you propose and sponsor.
Well, look, there's what I just discussed is one way of creating that that requirement for federal government to get involved, from certification to also supporting the 401k. That's what I could do, and that's what these politicians could have done over the 20 years. It's simple fixes. These are not difficult issues to discuss. The one other thing I would add, though, I would make sure that we do not have the people who are managing these 401ks. Currently, there's a lot of the 401ks for first responders. It was with the military until we pushed back on it just a few months ago, that were being invested in Chinese companies. Why are you investing my 401k in Chinese companies that are a nation that has an adversary to the United States? We will be able to then force those 401k managers to realize that you're going to have to invest these in American companies. And if you had done that from the beginning on American-owned, American-operated businesses in our company, right now the 9th Congressional District would have had some of that pension money, if not a lot of it, coming back to build businesses in the 9th Congressional District. These are simple solutions, but the current incumbents sat there for all these years and didn't do anything about it, to include these individuals who are pretending that they can now fix the issues that were the cause for from the beginning. is the reason where we are today, and is the reason why we haven't been able to go forward. The only way I could help us is to get into Congress, get voted in to be able to drive these issues. If not, the individuals that are currently in Congress, they like the fact that they have entrapped the unions into belonging to them. Look, I've had young men and women who want to live in Chicago here, who've sat there and complained to their fathers, to me, as to the fact that, you know what, we have to do pension reform. This is not the way it should be working for us. And their father is about to retire from, I'm not going to, is about to retire from um, 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 one of these organizations that does provide the pension through the state. And you have to remind the child that, look, you do know that that is actually going against your dad's retirement when you say these things. So now we pitted family members against each other. The son and daughters who not only can benefit from those pensions, but are against it because they realize it's destroying their future. Only a politician from DC, an incumbent, could put somebody in that position to where they cause not only friction point between family members, they cause friction points between police and the communities that are supposed to support, to put friction points against individuals directly internally in our country that are not warranted. And we need to replace them if we are going to get to a point where the end product is going to be a better America. Kathy, I've lost your voice. I hope that we're able to pick it up, but I've lost your voice.
Yeah, I was asking what there are other issues that you support as a candidate for the ninth Congressional District. What are a couple of them?
Well, there's a lot of them. We're short on time today to get into the other pieces, but what I would like to do, Kathy, if possible, would be able to bring you back in the future to discuss some of those other points. But the biggest thing is economic reform. Continue doing what has been done already under the current POTUS, as far as building the coffers of the Latino and Black communities, get those unemployment rates up again, to be able to give the freedoms that the American people need. Work on the issues to allow the unions to finally break away from the politicians who entrapped them a long time ago in the position they are today.
I would be happy to come back and look forward to talking about those issues with you, Sargis. I think it's important for people to know that that our candidates don't just run for office and hope for the best. They need money, they need support, they need people to volunteer, to make phone calls, write letters, stuff envelopes. It sounds very trite and old-fashioned, but that is truly how candidates run now. And I think I want to let voters know that if they want to support you and your candidacy, they go to votesangari.com so that they can make a contribution, or let you know how else they can help you. Yard signs in their yards, phone calls to their neighbors, having small gatherings so that you have an opportunity to speak directly to voters. When I was a candidate some time ago, those things were so important to me, because it's where you really get your finger on the pulse of what's important to the voters in your district. And opportunities like that are not as available in the current COVID crisis that we're experiencing. But nonetheless, there are opportunities to host a Zoom call, to get 9 or 10, 50 voters on, all on a call, so that you can speak directly to them, hear what's important to the voters in your district, so that you can let them know what your plans are to address the problems that they are concerned about in the ninth Congressional District, and so that you can better represent them when you go to Congress.
No, thank you, Kathy. Thank you for the wonderful endorsement and kind words. Today I was listening on one of the news outlets where the Democratic presidential candidate Biden was complaining about Georgia suppressing the votes. But imagine how a free, fair election is being suppressed by the fact that the governor of our state doesn't even allow me to go and knock on somebody's door to introduce myself, because he's outlawed me to be able to run a campaign that way. Yet the incumbent, by the power of incumbency, is sitting there with $2.3 million in her coffers and be able to sweep in a new election, especially with the opportunity that they have at the state level now to gerrymander the district again. It is unfortunate. It's a reality of what we have to deal with. We are constantly under the pressure. The system, the machine will ensure that their candidates remain in power. And let's try to break this trend. It shouldn't be where one democratic machine organization for 71 years controls the 9th congressional district and is trying to control it for 73 years. It makes absolutely no sense. But Kathy, God bless you. Much appreciate you coming on the show. Enjoy the discussion, and we will have you back again. With that said, I want to make sure that our fans know that, again, support us. Go to votesangari.com and please donate money to us if you can, because we cannot run a campaign without the dollars as much as possible. And we will see you again next week. And this is New Paradigms.
Thanks, Sargis. Look forward to it.